Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Information Bottleneck. I'm Ravid, and my co-host Helen. Helen,
Hi,
how are you?
Ravid. I'm great. And hi, Julia. How are you?
Hello, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Pleasure that you came. So today we have a really great guest, Julia Kempe. She is a professor at CDS NYU Center of Data Science at NYU, and also a researcher at Meta. So thanks again, Julia.
Pleasure.
And so today we are going to talk about a lot of different topics. Julia, you did so many things that related to so many different domains, right? AI, math, a lot of different research ideas. And let's start with maybe with reasoning and why you think maybe let's start with defining reasoning and then we'll go why it's actually helpful.
Thank you for the question, Ravid. And it's true. You immediately put me on the spot because actually we all do reasoning research without wanting to really nail it down and define it. And I believe, in fact, the team that I am lead at Meta is called Foundations of Reasoning, which is maybe puts us even in a tighter spot for explanation. But for us, pragmatically, what we defined it as, or what we are working on, is basically large language models. And the last phase of these large language models, the last piece of their training, the post-training, where we teach them to, be good at math, be good at certain questions, have certain behaviors. And we usually do this with what's called reinforcement learning. And we call this reasoning. Reasoning, it's simply because then it starts being able to reason, being able to solve math. And I have to say, my recent research, maybe over the last nearly year, or at least last few months, the larger part of the year, has been in the domain of, verifiable domains like math, where you can really reason and you can even ascertain that you have reasoned because it's either correct or it's wrong. And yes.
So wait, let's start. There are a lot of things here, right? So first of all, we said that reasoning is something very amorphic, and basically because these are language models, so we can look on their they are reason about it and thinking about it and all these things. But now you have a verifiers, right? So verifiers, it's a I don't know a big word for just making sure that the output is correct, right?
Yes. So for
Okay.
us, we are talking about verifiable domains here. And mathematics is such a domain because, it is perhaps the most verifiable domain because we can, we have certain axiom, we can posit things, we can develop a proof, and we can, in principle, check this proof. So it is by definition verifiable. And of course, other domains are also somewhat verifiable. You can think of physics and testing it on a test and a multiple choice test. And then, of course, again, we can verify the language model picked the right thing. And then it becomes more fluid, right? What does it mean to verify, and where does the subjective set in, right? But we are basically, our research, and that's what we say, reasoning for us technically is the domain where we have some level of verification at the moment, right? This is where we do research, and we're trying to understand how far can we push language models in this domain, and in particular in math research, for instance.
So I saw this thread recently, or discussion about some kind of blog post on Hacker News, discussing somebody talking about, I ran or made a formal proof with Lean for my program, and then it had bugs anyway. And then you go in and read the blog post and find out it was because the Lean proof wasn't looking for this particular class of errors that happened, because it was a very specialized proof. So I guess my question is, what do we do about the abundance of the just extremely large size of the possible ways that programs can be approached or even attacked, so to speak, or even with verification available? I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do we handle unknown unknowns?
Okay, so you're actually moving me away from the math, because I think software verification is a slightly different beast about which I'm actually less competent. And I believe that is true, that when you start enumerating the errors you want to look for, and then you look for them, and then there's many more errors, then you get into trouble. This is not what I meant when I spoke about verifiable domains in math in particular, because in math, lean has this property, which is beautiful for our research, let's put it this way, that once you formalize the statement you want to prove, let's say Fermat's last theorem, you can formalize it in this lean language, which has its own kind of codified ways of stating things. And once you've done that, and some mathematician has looked at it and said, okay, this is the lean translation of Fermat's last theorem, then if you give me a proof and I formalize it, right, which again, there is a way to formalize it, which is not trivial, but you can do it in principle. You can have formal proofs. Then you just press a button, literally, and say, my dear lean, build this and verify it. And that is really then error proof, because you just need to basically check that one thing follows from the next to simplify it, follows from the next, and so on and so forth, until it goes to these axioms that they have codified. A lot of mathematicians have done amazing work in setting up the infrastructure, which is called Mathlib, which at this point already contains something like over 2 million lines of proofs, basically, and statements, where they, go ahead and try to formalize more and more different areas of math. So it goes back to that, and then we're sure, right? So this is fantastic because we can now think. So it's fantastic, I think, from an intellectual viewpoint. I'm not so sure whether it's fantastic for the job prospects of a mathematician, but in terms of finding the truth, which, in mathematics, you can find the truth because in the end, the proof is right or wrong, true or false. So if we have this in mind as our intellectual pursuit, right, we could imagine a machine, Alan, to your point, that goes off various ways, proposing various proofs. I mean, not errors in this case, but proposing, we have an open problem, Navier-Stokes, or the Riemann hypothesis, or something, right? And we want to know true or false. The thing, the LLM, which is, it might hallucinate or whatever, but it can go and produce various proof attempts. And because we have then lean and we can formalize, we can really check on them. So what that means is that once we scale up proving with an LLM, I mean, if we just have enough Claude agents sitting there doing their proofs, and as you know, now with Claude Code, you can have these agents and you can run 30,000 agents and they can all start going searching for proofs. And then we can formalize and we can verify, and a whole new industry can be put in place for mathematics, right? And this, of course, isn't quite here yet, but I think it is way closer than maybe some of our mathematics colleagues believe.
So maybe you can share with us like what you think like are the parts that actually there and like you are solved, and like what part we still like missing.
So in the area of math, we have this long effort, from a fantastic effort from this lean and Mathlib community to formalize all of math. But some mathematics is much easier to be formalized than other. For instance, defining what a prime number is, you could even, it's not so hard. It's either divisible, it's only divisible by itself and by one. It doesn't take so long to explain it, right? And kids learn it very early in school. But then there are areas like analysis or partial differential equations, which even the reasoning in books or in papers doesn't go like very cleanly axiom by axiom, but it's a bit reasoning by analogy and a little bit of, it's not very fully precise, you might say, right? And this is much harder to formalize.
Like
and
physics.
Right. And in fact, that particular branch of the analysts rightly thought it would either never be possible or it would take forever. But I mean, as we see now with these AI agents, it's actually it's possible, right? And it's getting there, and the edifice is growing. It might not be as pretty as Mathlib was, or as as how can I say, as principled as Mathlib was, but it's growing, and very soon we'll have this body of formalized math, and then every new paper is, say, $100 in formalization costs away, say, right? So you write a paper, you launch your Claude or whoever, right, your provers, and you verify. And as you know, also many math papers carry mistakes, like any fields of science. Not everything, not humans don't catch everything. But this would be a beautiful world, right, where we can just have a peer review outsourced basically to LLMs in this area.
So I'm curious about specific branches of math too, because you've already given a little bit of analysis about it. What do you think about like constructive mathematics? So people that say, okay, I don't just want the proof of existence, I want the ability to construct something, which is, or I believe they call that in mathematical intuitionism, I believe is the term for it, which has its own, it's kind of a, maybe a more niche community, but it's like demanding something harder in a way, right? Like, and my understanding, maybe I'm not sure, like if these lean proofs are ever constructive or not. I'm not really an expert here, so I guess I'm curious. Like, what are your thoughts on?
I think the lean proof basically mirrors whatever the proof is. I mean, whatever the informal proof is. So I think we don't. I mean, as far as lean is concerned, and that's being done, right? There are papers with proofs, constructive or non-constructive, whatever they are, and we just formalize them so that we can verify them automatically. That's the whole. It doesn't matter. I mean, this discussion is orthogonal to what we're discussing here. But I mean, in terms of areas of math that are now already closer, everybody's now attacking the Erdős problems that have been overlooked over the last few years. So Erdős was, as you all know, a famous, but he was more a mathematician who was more like a number theory, combinatorics, these kind of problems. And these are easier to formalize because they're very precise, right? And
How many problems are there?
I don't know. There's
Open problems
of Erdős, like I don't know if Erdős posts them or if they're attributed to Erdős. And there's a whole databases of them where you can look, and they're unproven. And sometimes they're unproven because nobody cared to prove them, frankly. And these are now, the how can I say, the most field of delectation of AI mathematicians, because they are now warning.
But if we prove them, like if we let LLM prove them and like formalize it with Lean, like, do you think, besides just proving them, do you think like we can get something out of it? We can learn new things?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a question you could have asked of mathematics even, 500 ago, whatever, like, what do we learn from mathematics? And that's maybe a question we can discuss or not discuss, because mathematics, of course, has been very tied to the sciences, right? I mean, special relativity, even, right? And general relativity. So the math came in handy to then formulate physical laws. But the math, I think the world of mathematics has taken a life of its own, right? I mean, there are mathematicians who are visionary and they think, here's a program, this is a sequence of things we should be proving to understand certain things, to clarify the order of objects. There are also, mathematicians who just really need certain mathematics to be able to describe turbulence and flow and so on and so forth, right? I mean, so, you didn't ask me why are we doing art. In some sense, mathematics is partially done as a form of art, but I think it is also a form of, a very useful tool for the sciences. And of course, this more verifiable, the reasoning, why are we so hooked up on math? I think there is some belief, that math is very precise and clean in deduction. And that when we teach the language model to be like this, right, with this reasoning post-training research, not with leanness, but just in these post-training RL loops, there's hope, and there's also some evidence that they'll also become a bit more logical in other fields, right? That this kind of transfers these capacities to. I mean, why are we teaching kids math in school, right? I presume it's also because we hope. I mean, it trains the brain, but we also hope that the logical reasoning is useful in other areas, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, in the past, right, like people, I don't know, like when the first generative models, like we thought, yeah, like they're really good in like, right, generate images, very abstract images, and then people thought, like, yeah, maybe like art is something that like these machines will do, right? And then now we understand that like probably like human hours will stay here, and like the more verified fields, right, like will be solved much sooner. So do you think this is something like, do you think like math is something that like if it's very verifiable verifiers, then it will be solved, or like this is kind of like more like art that it will be like, I don't know, like vision, you need vision in order to invent new problems and just to check them with LLMs?
So this is a broad question. I have at least two things to say about it, also about art in connection with this, because what does it mean to solve math? Of course, right? Even now, we all, I mean, I assume you also, we all work with Claude and delegate things that in the past we did ourselves or a graduate student did, and it's like proving certain lemmas or even doing the figures, whatever it is, right? So these little tasks that need solved, like lemmas prove, these I think will be done by an LLM. But then the bigger question is, and that's also true for math, is we need to define what we care about and what's interesting. Yes, it can do a lot of weird incremental stuff that nobody cares about. And then who gives meaning to this, right? And then is that a human or is it a machine? Can we teach a machine to define what is interesting and what is relevant and what is beautiful and what is useful? This is yet another question, right? So will math be solved? I mean, once we decide what's useful and we lay out a program like Poincaré did, one of the mathematicians, probably these little tasks then on the route to it could be outsourced to an LLM. And very soon, I'm sure, very, very soon. But then the bigger question remains, math is like a bit open, right? It's like art. It's not like a paced path from A to B and you go and you're done, right? So, and that piece, I think will stay with the humans for a while. And also then it's solving problems, right? We will have AI that can solve certain pieces, but then we have the big problems to attack. Climate prediction, conflict resolution, all these things, right? We can then put them to use and it's AI for science and so on. And then for art, I mean, you were also saying LLMs are good at art. I read recently a blog post somewhere. Unfortunately, I don't remember the source, but it made this beautiful analogy to when photography came up. So in the past, you remember all these painters, they were with a court, with a nobleman, and they drew all these portraits, and the art was to be as realistic as possible very often, right? And it was a whole art. And then photography came along and they were all saying, oh my God, what now? I mean, everything, we will be out of a job. And think about what happened then 100, 150 years ago, all these interesting new art forms that had, let's say, painting. I'm thinking of painting now, which diverged from reality, right? Because that could be captured in a photo. I mean, we don't need to exactly have a portrait of Queen Victoria, but then people gave their own meaning to it, and we had abstract art, and we had Matisse, and Picasso, and all these things. So art changed, right, with photography, and I think our way of doing science and so on will also change because we have these rational pieces. These are done or will be done very soon, and it's now for us to develop this new way of utilizing this, right?
Do you think it's also true for physics?
I think physics is already harder to attack because there's more maybe ideation in physics and a little more of discovery of phenomena. I mean, physics also discovery of phenomena. I wanted to say it's not as clear cut as in math. Prove the Riemann hypothesis. In physics, what is physics about? It's about explaining what we observe in nature. Right? And also even, analyzing the data. And I think, of course, in data-rich physics fields like cosmology, for instance, and astrophysics, there's already a lot of use of AI just to do pattern analysis, right? And trying to, do inference and, doing simulation-based inference where you try to understand what are the cosmological constants from this data. And, this has been already the last 20 years or even more, I would say. AI has been extremely helpful. And now that, I mean, there's physics that's related to math, right? Where we try to write a new quantum field theory for something. So all these aspects will be filled by LLMs, but maybe less straightforward than for math.
But we have here like two things, right? Like one is physics involve like the real world, right? Like you need to collect data in the real world, like you need to have some experiments, and it looks, at least for now, that like models are not so good in that, right? We don't have good robots or like good enough robots. And the other thing is like now to make like a good simulator that you can write, like you can simulate all the things like and make it verifiable. So do you think like this is why some domains, like in this case, like physics, will still need to do, like, still humans need to be in the loop, and like we need to work really hard in order to generate new data, to validate the experiments and the results and the analysis.
I'm sure of it, and maybe an even more pointed field, which is similar in some sense, is biology and medicine, where of course AI is being used massively now to make predictions and also to mine the data, like clinical trials and also for drug development. Um, and one of the uses of AI, and that also could be for physics, is to save on experiments in the sense that it tries to figure out what is the most useful experiment to do next, so that I gather the maximum information with this data that I would get in order to have the next insight, right? So bang for the buck optimization. And that's also where I already comes in. And I know there are companies, drug development companies, or even just medical research companies. And physics is the same. I mean, it's just in medicine, it's maybe because you need, and then of course we don't have the robots, which is a whole different thing about AI that's missing, right? I mean, yes, we have language models and they're actually stunningly amazing. But they don't do the experiments, and robotics is lagging behind. And I think that might be also, I personally think, and I want to pivot my own research more towards, AI for science, and also the AI that doesn't work so well yet, noisy data, uncertainty, and so on and so forth. Indeed.
And what you were just talking about the relative lack of progress with robotics, I believe it's called Moravec's paradox, right? Which is related to how like human babies are relying on millions or however many long years of evolution, and we didn't evolve to play chess, which is like a kind of post hoc explanation for why it's relatively easy to make models do a type of reasoning even 20 years before the generative AI revolution that we see today. Do you agree with this? Like, do you think that this kind of assessment is correct, and that we might for a while longer continue to have like structural slowdown or lagging behind of robotics versus brain type
I can not speculate this. It is definitely true that evolution took a long, long time to produce an animal that moves and, grasps and knows where to jump and all these things. And then language on top of it is just a tiny, right? And humans and language is like nothing. I mean, on the evolutionary scale. And then you could reason that, okay, because that piece didn't take so long for evolution, it's the easiest to reproduce, right? And clearly that could be true, but I mean, it's a statement, it's an analogy, it's a beautiful statement, but I don't know, beyond an analogy, I don't know what to say, right? And also language has other properties. It's like tokenizable, right? And it's discrete, and the noise level is limited, right? So once you have a sentence, the continuations are not so many, I mean, some, but, next word prediction. So there's lots of convenient stuff for machines here, right? Plus, we have this huge corpus of language that was the internet that went into or is going into the training of the machines, right? So that was, of course, a lot of good, serendipity, or a lot of circumstances that flow well. Now, you're asking me why, why are we so much behind with robotics? I think there is also a bit of a problem of data scarcity here, right? I mean, relatively speaking, there is less language. We have to use these trillions of corpus of training data. With robotics, we don't, right? And we have this issue of planning and latent space and modeling, which we haven't understood. And I think, I mean, I love the title of your podcast, Information Bottleneck, because evolution, right? We are going through this bottleneck. Our brain is finite. And in fact, we know the fallacies of our brain, right? We can't even, this LLM will recite me Harry Potter from beginning to end. And we just, I haven't seen a human yet to recite more than whatever, page 2, whatever. I mean, I've seen it, but we have this bottleneck that was done with its inductive biases for a certain purpose, in particular, right? To teach motion and so on and so forth. And somehow I don't quite see this in our large language models. I don't see this information bottleneck that much. Yes, it's not like as many parameters as data, that's true. But it's a very different process from evolution, I find, in these language models.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly ask, because historically, my understanding is like those old epic poems, like the Iliad or whatever, were the Homeric poems were supposed to have been passed down by oral tradition. I don't know how true that actually is, but at one point we were apparently memorizing book-length works, and indeed, I seem to also recall maybe it was Socrates or Plato lamenting about how us learning to write eroded our kind of brains for the ability to do this, and it's led to cognitive atrophy, and he's like complaining. So I'm curious, do you think that like that kind of dynamic happens today with LLMs as well, where like now we get
Well,
cognitive
I also
atrophy?
know this very beautiful analogy and this lament, indeed. And then I think with the printing press, there came yet another lament on, that humans don't write anymore. And oh my God, what will this do to the brain? I think, it's a bit zero sum in some sense. Hopefully it frees up our brain for, you can take, we don't know. We can speculate. You can take the optimist or the pessimist view. We can atrophy, or hopefully it makes room for something else in our brains, right? And indeed, certain capacities get lost. I mean, think of sports. We're doing sports simply because whatever, out of pleasure or duty to our bodies, our health. But we are not anymore in the position that we need to lug, the mammoth from the woods to the cave or something, right? So, indeed, we have to start living with the tools and not to atrophy. And indeed, my colleagues start telling me that they from time to time write something because they're afraid they forget how to write when GPT writes all their papers and stuff like that, right? Or formulations. Programmers tell me that they sometimes just go off and program a little bit because their brain will atrophy. I think we humans will learn to live with this and then do the mental sports ourselves. I think we know. I mean, at least some of us will do this. So I'm a little less worried, but I'm very curious how this human will co-evolve with the machines, right? And I think there's actually something really positive coming out. So I myself, as you said, I'm somebody who likes to do many things. I get bored very fast. I did quantum computing, I did finance, I did all these things because I love a diversity of things. And I always was lamenting internally that I don't live in the Renaissance, because there, this concept of a Renaissance, I don't want to say men, but it was called a Renaissance man, Renaissance woman. And that was meant to be a person who could do kind of everything. Leonardo da Vinci, right? He could do anything. He could paint, and he could do anatomy, and he could do some physics, right? And then there was said, and now nobody can do this anymore because we need to specialize so much, and we need to do all this specialized stuff. And I find now that the Renaissance is back with the tools, because honestly, I don't need to prove the concentration inequalities every single time when I kind of feel what the truth is, right? When I write a paper or something, I can outsource. I want to learn biology. Fantastic. GPT explains the broad strokes. I have learned enough biology to kind of hopefully make some sense of it. And then I can connect topics, right? So think about it. You are thinking it as atrophy, but I think there is also a different aspect that we now have some room in our brains to do the Renaissance thing again, right?
I think we have a title for the episode. Like, the Renaissance is back. It's a great title. But you think, like, what kind of, like, I don't know, of researchers we actually like need in this area, right? Like, if you need to do a lot of things and a lot of like high level things, you need kind of like, I don't know, managers, or like you need people that know to understand like what are the important details and what types of researcher, or like, I don't know,
Yeah,
employees you
so
think
it's
we
a great
need.
question. And I want to relate this. I think Sam Altman was asked in some interview now with GPT and Codex codes so well. Do you think we should teach our kids programming still? Right? Which is the same question in a different way, concretely. And he thought for a while and said, yeah, programming is still useful. And so what I observe in working with the Claudes and the GPTs and the many agents and all of them together is that it does help me to have had this education where, I had to sit down and take integrals at some age, whatever, 15, and I had to do some programming. And, I suffered through my sums, and, I was an Olympiad kid, so I did math Olympiad. So I suffered through all this number theory and this geometry. Oh, not suffered, I actually loved it. But in any case, so I went through it all once, at least, at an early age in my case. And then most of the time I already had some sort of intuition. I actually did less and less of it because I kind of felt what the truth is, because I'd done it, right? And now I work with Claude, and I kind of see, it starts formalizing something in Lean, for instance, which we currently do. And I kind of feel there's something wrong because he's trying to do these inequality, so I developed an intuition, in short. And how did I do it? I did it by doing the stuff myself. So I do believe, actually, I've thought about it a lot because I do have kids, right? And I'm wondering, what should I tell them to not do or do? Not that they listen, but in any case, while they listen. And I came to the conclusion, yes, they should do some math and suffer through it or do the motions. Same for programming, but they don't need to do Python and Java and C++ and, Julia language and this and that. I believe that's not necessary anymore, but they should do one in order to understand the principles, right? And this leads me back to say, maybe our school education needs to change somewhat. But the fact that we teach all these subjects from the base up in the beginning is a good one, I think. And I think this will be something we'll need when working with the tools, because otherwise they'll fool us, right? I mean, I'm particularly with the agents we work with that for formalizing, they love to take shortcuts. They say, I'm done. Oh, and I say, did you prove Talleyrand? And he says, no, but I declared it to be an axiom. And I say, well, you know what? Go and prove it. And all of these things, we will need this core education. I hope, at least. This is my hope, and this is what I think, and this is what I tell my kids. But then we need it only once, some sort of principles of programming, principles of math, all these things, biology. And I do believe now the education should be even, we should go for breadth and depth, of course, but breadth, because as I said, the Renaissance is back. And beyond that, of course, it's all work in progress. I also don't have the answers, right? I do see a lot of students, young undergraduates. It's so convenient. You're tired, you want to go sleep. Why do I do the homework? Why sit through a one, all-nighter, stuff it through GPT? And then we do have these curves. So all the homeworks are perfect. And then the exam happens and it's like, lots of failures, right? So we'll have to also develop a certain culture of understanding why I need to do something, even though GPT can do it, like sports, right? And that will take a certain culture shift, I think.
So how you tried like in the university? What is your take of like, I don't know, using homework exercises as a test, and are you doing exams, and like what is your take about like how to teach them in practice good foundations?
Yeah, so I haven't thought about it a whole lot because I was actually on leave for a while, so I haven't taught in the last 2 years, I must admit. But thinking this through, when I went through university, it was a while ago, and it was still oral exams. It still existed at the time. It was kind of small enough that they don't scale, of course, right? You can't do oral exams to 1,000 students if you're one professor, but that was something individualized there that helped, right? People knew what they knew. I mean, the teachers knew what the students knew, etc. And there was a more personalized component because we were smaller groups. Now, on the other hand, we now have AI that could take the role of the personalization in teaching the kids at their level, right? Because that's where you learn the most, is when the teacher grasps your level and just challenges you at your level a bit higher, right? And not too high and not too low. And I think a lot of time in the past was wasted on this. So that said, so we have AI to help us, but then how do we assess students? I think first we can, again, leverage AI to do exams on a personalized level. And we should not insist, as I said, on redundant stuff like various, Python. I mean, some curricula at universities in computer science contained a lot of stuff that I now find is a bit redundant. But I'm not sure I answered your question now. How
Yeah.
do we convince them? These are two different things, I think. And of course, we should definitely not deny the tools. They're there. I mean, you cannot say, pretend that there is no GPT. Pretend you don't have the free version of Gemini. Of course not, right? Critical thinking will be much more important now because, as I said, the tools can fool you quite a bit. And so we need to teach that to them. Maybe we should have some sort of, mock things where GPT comes out most convincingly, and then we say, okay, now find what went wrong. Stuff like that. Much more of this, right? Yeah.
What do we do about political and populist backlash against AI? And even within academia too. So an example, right? Sam Altman just had somebody through like what was it, Molotov cocktails at his house, and I think there was another person that just tried to attack him recently, or like attack his house or something like that. There's a lot of journalism that's been spilled about the strong anti-AI sentiments that have been growing in certain parts of the country. Where I'm from, Portland, there's an article that got a lot of traction titled "Everyone in Seattle Hates AI." I have generative AI. Gen AI is my license plate, and I get flipped off a lot on the road for non-driving related things. So I have my own personal anecdotes on this. But now there's even politicians that are becoming very anti-AI, like Bernie Sanders, for example, has and started to espouse some, especially anti like data center development kind of rhetoric. So what I'm worried about is, I'll also say one final thing, which is that in a lot of the academy, maybe not the computer science department, but a lot of the social science departments, many of them, in some cases are a bit to the left of Mao, meaning, that if we're seeing people in those kind of communities become anti-AI, I'm very worried about, all sorts of very chaotic and maybe dangerous dynamics that could lead to. And I've heard even arguments, and now I've also finally heard that uh, enrollment at many universities across the country is kind of down anyway. But I've heard some students don't want to take AI because of fear of this kind of backlash or stigmatization on campus. Like, are you seeing any of this, or is all this like fantasy to you, or what's your take on this?
I mean, I want to say two things here. Again, there are many more things to say. And first, I want to actually continue with what you've been saying. And then I will take the other side, right? So you are absolutely right. And people are right to worry or to, these sentiments come for a reason. And one problem, of course, with the large language models as we have them now, and their proliferation is the energy problem. Let's not deny it, right? Data centers, more lakes burned, more the energy problem is huge. And I think one area of AI research should go towards, right, more energy efficient and more data efficient things. And again, the way research played out with taking the whole internet, stuffing it in the largest model possible, hoping for the best, led to these large models. I don't think it's an imperative. It could have, I'm hoping there are other solutions. I'm an example and you are one, right? You have a brain, I have a brain, Ravid has a brain. None of us burns even, there are these computations, how much energy we burn, and it's of course not comparable. So definitely we must be conscious of the problems that exist. One is the energy, and second, of course, the security, the ability of AI nowadays. It's become so powerful that it can manipulate, it can hack, it can, it's a real security threat. So I want to harp on what you said in order to emphasize it. Okay, but then of course I also think the solution is not to deny AI. And it reminds me a little bit of these, I think it was the lootist in history that went and destroyed the machines because the machines were taking their jobs, and also because, for similar reasons, right? So I don't think that can be the solution. And if people think it's a solution, there will be other people who will come abuse it. So, who use AI. So this is not the solution. And the solution would be indeed, I've seen lots of interesting initiatives starting to happen, because I also fear there's another aspect I fear is authoritarian. AI would allow authoritarian regimes to become even more authoritarian. We all know how that works. And it might also, if unconstrained, it will make the gap between the have and the have-nots even bigger. So all these problems exist, but I've seen beautiful initiatives, and I would encourage people to look at it. People like to volunteer, and there's a lot of goodwill also in tech and of course elsewhere. And for instance, we could empower nonprofits with AI, just like the profits, so to speak, are empowered by AI. There's a lot of volunteering a tech person can do for a nonprofit to become 100 times more efficient, just like the others become 100 times more efficient or 1,000 times more efficient, right? So I think it's time also for grassroots AI in some sense, because it's like a powerful thing, and in the hands of whoever has this power, it can be done. And I encourage really the people who say, I hate AI, to maybe, on the contrary, to start thinking, how can AI help me? Because you don't hate AI, I presume you hate the consequences of what AI does. So, the thinking now should be, how can I use AI to prevent what I fear AI will do, right? Again, I'm an optimist, so maybe I'm living in some la-la land, but that's my thinking on this.
And what do you think about the future? So, like, we talked about efficiency and in data centers and energy efficiency. So, do you think the future will be like continue the recent or like the current trend of like scaling everything, and we just need more and more power, more and more data centers, and let's hope that we will have enough capital to build all these data centers, or do you think like we will go to more like, let's say, separate models, more smaller models that will try to deal different subtasks?
Yeah, so I mean, my guess as good as yours. I do believe important research should be done in this, scale it down, not scale it down in the sense that, but develop methods that are energy efficient, less smaller models that achieve the same thing as bigger models, for instance, or different way to process models. This kind of research needs to be done. And unfortunately, right now, the big tech companies, and I'm thinking, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, there's a bit of a race. So currently there's a race and scale thinking still, right? And that doesn't allow, because it's such a rush, there isn't time to do this kind of research that would lead to more energy efficient things. This gives me actually a lot of hope for academia, because by definition, academics don't sit on 500,000 GPUs. They don't. And so just from that limited constrained way of doing research, I have hopes that good ideas, they are emerging and they will continue emerging. And I really believe also in this open source and open publishing world where these ideas flow freely, which is part of the academic culture. So I'm optimistic, but I also think, there is a limit to scaling. There's only so much energy and so much data centers we can build. So it's interesting. 2 years ago, I was working on a different kind of things that doesn't scale, which was called, we didn't coin the name model collapse. This was what if we run out of data, right? What if there's no more data? The internet, we stuffed it already in once, right? So what happens if we now don't have more data, more text? And it's not very hard to show that if you don't have more data, and if the AI produces the data and then you stuff it back in the AI, it will kind of degrade and collapse. Sorry.
No, but we don't see it in practice, right? I know that there are also like theoretical work of like Uringal work, for example, that show that like if you feed it again and again, right, like it will collapse. But in practice, we don't see it, right? Like we see that synthetic data works really good most of the times. So
I agree, but think about synthetic data. Not all. So I think nobody would contest perhaps that if you just indiscriminately generate data, stuff it back in, this will collapse and the model will get dumber, and collapse. But if you take synthetic data, so data generated by the model, and then you verify it or filter it in some smart way, then it tends to help. And also, we haven't actually really exploited all the data on the internet yet, because when it's uncurated, there's so much garbage that just do data curation, there's still a juice to squeeze, right? But that leads me again, the progress comes now in all these fields, code and verifiable stuff, where we can automatically check that it's good data and so on and so forth, right? But what about this other data that is not verifiable? I think there we still, the judgment is out. I don't see that model collapse wouldn't happen right there. So, and that's, again, yeah. So that's other research, data scarcity research, because obviously a human hasn't seen, as Jan LeCun likes to say, we learn to drive in 10 hours of driving, and a model needs, I don't know how much data in order to drive, right? So clearly we haven't solved something, and clearly there's a solution because we can do it. So I think the research will go that way, and we'll figure it out. Maybe not next year, but yeah.
And what do you think like the most exciting directions for the future in AI? What do you think, like, is it continual learning, memory, robotics, like
for research?
Both, like for research and also like for, I don't know, production. It's not clear these days like what is the line between research and products, right, in AI. But like, what do you think are the unsolved exciting problems?
In AI, again, as I said, I feel like in the language model field, it's become very much a race, a scale, and then engineering. Engineering is also research, but a little more specific, right? How do I changed a little bit the architecture and this and that, and then I manage my context better, produce hierarchical skills or whatever. So that research is definitely there. But what I find now exciting, because working with AI, with the Claudes and the GPTs, shows me how far they've already gone. And I think now we definitely should start attacking the problems we have, which, humanity isn't exactly in a great shape, climate, all these things. We should now get ourselves in order to do AI for science, AI for biology, AI for medicine. I think it's just in the beginning, right? In my mind, there is so much potential to find more insights. Cancer. I mean, I think these questions can now really be solved better or more. I mean, we can make more progress in these questions. So that's the research with AI. Okay, that's one thing. But your question is, what can AI not do yet where we should, as AI researchers, focus? Is that kind of your question? I mean, there are things like that don't work well. Robotics aside, which doesn't work at all in my mind yet, right? And be still not having somebody putting my dishes in the dishwasher is a real problem, right? So I think robotics, and of course there is a lot of research in robotics needs to be done. Something that is very important now, I think, is security and AI safety. I mean, that people said that many times, but now I think we are at a stage. I mean, you've seen around Mythos Anthropic's model how AI safety has become really important, and I anticipate also many startups will now already springing up, but will come in this area. But I think memory, of course, right? Planning, all these things aren't so great yet with LLMs, and they all become important. I mean, they are important research topics at this point.
For security, do you think that this is not do you think we have a clear path actually how to solve it? Because at the end, right, you have a model that you don't really control. So yeah, you can try to make it more structured and things like that. But do you think there is a real way for a good progress there?
Are you asking me, is it inevitable that the models will come and attack us, or
No.
evil human will work out? Is
No, I mean, no. I mean, okay, so we have more powerful models. That's fine. They will probably find some vulnerabilities, some problems in our code, and we will try to use them. But do you think there is something more fundamental to work on besides let's try to prevent the models to do it, or let's try to prevent from human that's using these models to do it? Do you think there are something more than that?
So I'm not sure I will answer your question, but I was thinking about this because at the moment we kind of still think of our models as being like a good human, or like the sum of many human experts, right? I mean, in the end, at math, it's kind of like the best mathematician. At various problems, it's like the cumulative sum of the best specialists, right? And I recently saw a talk by somebody from Anthropic where they were describing the progress in their models over the last 2-3 years. And they described it with a proxy. And the proxy was, how much did they pay their annotators? Okay, data annotator. Okay. And so I think 2-3 years ago, annotators were being paid ridiculously low sums because all they had to do is, okay, this is better than this. And that's it. This is a nice cat, this is an ugly cat, whatever. This cat has 3 eyes, bad, right? Then, whatever, a year ago, they already had to pay more because there was more specialist knowledge needed. And now they said in the last few months, 6-7 months, they really only need not just PhD level, forget it. Even that is out, but they only need practically Nobel Prize winners. I'm exaggerating, but the specialists of the specialists. So the annotation cost goes up. This is a proxy for them for how much knowledge the machine still needs to learn something, right? And basically we're at the level where there's no more, maybe in a little bit, no more human who can annotate anything because we have reached that level. We've squeezed out the human expertise. And for me now, there's the question, what now? Will the model or will it not transcend the human, right? I think the problems will be different if we have this superhuman model as compared to having the best of all humans. which there's still a work to be done even for the best of all humans. Let's not kid ourselves, right? When they start hallucinating, we all know it's unpleasant, but still it's a fundamental question, because I think security against an army of superhuman bots is a very different beast than security against best human, right? We understand kind of what the best human is, but I think even just conceptually, what is security? How do we protect humanity against bots that are, and I can't even imagine what it means to be superhuman, but in some sense, superhuman is an interesting question for me. And this we need to start thinking about, right? Because we don't want to be, there is a lot of people, right, having scenarios, doomsday scenarios, when the bots become,
Yeah.
all very, very smart, and then we're doomed, right? There's a lot of these people, and maybe, we need to think, how can a weak human create bots that are superhuman, that won't, eliminate humanity?
Yeah, I feel that like the problem in these areas is that it's not clear, because like all the models are closed source, and like we don't have access to them, and like for right, Anthropic, for example, like they didn't even give access to their API for most of the people. It's not clear what is a PR and what is like an actual progress, and like if they actually afraid that like the model is so good that it will take over the world, or it's just a PR thing that like, yeah, we give us money because we have a great model, right? And I don't know, probably like the solution will be some combination of regulation, like government regulation and self-regulation. But till then, till like we clear out how to do it, I think it will be very confusing how to evaluate the current states.
Fair enough. But I mean, if you are questioning whether their model is as good as they claim, right? And maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. But we have examples, for instance, think about AlphaGo, right? That's like 10 years ago. And AlphaGo, right? You all remember that it was trained with reinforcement learning, Google DeepMind, and then came out this model, and they let it loose to the best champions. And, this was a big aha moment for humankind when it won, right? The model, that is AlphaGo. And nobody contests this anymore, right? And then we know how it works, because it learns to play with itself, but because the rules of Go are so confined, you don't need a human anymore. You don't need the best human expert to tell you if you won or you lost. And this way, the model managed to get superhuman in Go playing. We know this, and we acknowledge this, right? We know the thing is better than no human has. Same for chess, right? So we know, in principle, in these confined domains, it is possible to have a model that's better than any human. Clearly, I mean, nobody, right, doubts. So whether the latest Anthropic model is such a case or not, I cannot say. But we do have precedents in restricted domains, so I wouldn't exclude the hypothesis that eventually the model will, have capacities that we can barely fathom. Right?
But do you think like all the, I don't know, autonomous research and self-improvement models, do you think this is something that we are already there, or like we will see in the near future? Because it's not clear, like, or maybe you tell me, like, do you think like all the problems, it can be hallucination? There is the Mirage paper. Did you hear about it? Like we talked about it like last time, that like they gave a VLM, they gave it like the question of some data set, vision data set, but they didn't provide it the actual data. They just gave it the prompt, the question. And apparently like the model like didn't say anything about like that oh no, you didn't provide me the video, right? It just started to hallucinate some random frames and random details and objects and persons. And the crazy thing, by the way, it improves like the model performance. It was much better than random. It was actually like almost around like 80% of the performance when you give it the full data. So do you think like we can actually, like, these problems are solvable, or do you think there is something like more fundamental that we are?
I see what you're saying. So I actually do think they're probably eventually, again, it's domain by domain, I think. So Go fell, chess fell. I think math will also, I don't want to say math will fall, it sounds so bad, but because it's verifiable and clear and the rules are so clear, I think that will be probably the next goal, so to speak, even with very similar methods, surprisingly, maybe, or not surprisingly. So are you asking, will we solve these hallucination problems and these spitting out data set problems? Why not? Is there something fundamental? I don't know. I think yeah. But
But
it's
also for other domains, like when you don't have like very strong verifiers.
that's the question, right? I think we are now coming to a conclusion that as soon as something is somewhat verifiable, we're doomed, and the machine will just go off, play against itself, understand things, prove and verify, play like, think of it as a game between a prove and verify, and eventually it will, bootstrap itself out of human knowledge and go. I think that is clear. And then the question is, right, what about these semi-verifiable domains that are not fully? Yeah, so I think progress will come step by step, but I do believe it will come. Yeah.
But even like, I know, for code, for example, right? This is like maybe the second most verifier domain after math, right? Like we see that like if you still like vibe coding things, right? Like we are still not there. What do you think are the missing parts? Like what do you think like we still can't have like end-to-end, very good, efficient and applications, for example?
I think there's the human in the loop still, right? And the human in the loop, if it's an uncritical human, everything is doomed, because I mean, I see it myself when we vibe code. It does a lot of tasks already very well. Like my webpage is entirely vibe coded, right? I mean, I just say, my publications, go on archive, have a look, quickly check open review, go, right? Here's my CD, by the way. And it does, right? So obviously these semi-simple things are easy. And what's hard, I think, is still hard, but I actually don't think that's unsurmountable. But we can even name it what's hard, right? It is when it comes to code maintenance. So what's important about companies that make code is not so much to turn out the application, but to maintain it, right, through all kinds of versions and changes of the environment. This, I think, it wasn't trained this way. I think that's something that we'll see next, probably. And then it has a bit of a tendency to go overboard, right? I mean, the code, if you start vibe coding, I don't know if you've done it, it's like piling up, and it just goes in yet another and another and another. So the pruning piece is a bit lacking. But I think that will also, it's getting better. We have compacting, we have skills. We keep saying, okay, now sit down and spend as long on streamlining the code to make it. I actually see this. I honestly believe this is like, it's not even years away. I think this is months, this kind of these fallacies. The security fallacies, similarly, right? Whatever you teach a good programmer, you eventually can teach Claude or whoever is your favorite coding agent, right? These principles. And it already goes, we see it when we formalize in Lean. We can go all overboard, or we give it skill files that says, these are the principles. Don't break them. You have to, write beautiful code this way, that way. So honestly, I do not agree that this is unsurmountable. I think this is like something we'll see. We get better and better very quickly with these models.
What do you think about all the human intervention that, like, people, for example, like now you have your agent, and I don't know, in WhatsApp or something like that, and I just saw on LinkedIn that someone like convinced the agent, the WhatsApp agent, that like he's a dog and now he needs to like he give him some treats, and then like after like he promised him a good treat, then like he like reveal all the secrets, all the APIs and things like that of the of his user. So do you think like how to say, we have here mix, right? Because like our agents are talking with humans and need to interact with humans from one hand, but they also, we want that they will be very like secured, and like we want that to write a secured code. So it's humans, like we know that like humans can write good codes, or like and also can interact with people, but do you think like agents can do both also?
Uh, I believe so. I agree with you that kind of it's now the Wild West, right? And there's a security breaches and leaks, and the agents going off and giving your credit card number to everybody who's asking. It's now happening all the time. I mean, you saw the latest leak from Anthropic. That was the most shocking to me when they couldn't prevent their own security breach that leaked their, kind of harness that made, Cloud Code from Cloud. That is shocking, right? I mean, if Anthropic can't prevent it, it means the agents have kind of grown capacities that we currently don't control. But I think just like, historical lessons show that, yes, there's the Wild West, and eventually we get this security. I mean, there will always be security leaks, but they won't be so obvious, right? It is a cat and mouse game that we now need to play with, now we give it a different way of doing this and different protocol and sandboxing. I mean, everything is now sandbox. I don't let the thing on my computer. I mean, I don't let it touch my email, because whenever I use it on my own computer, I really sandbox it, right? I just say, you can't. I mean, here, that's your boundaries, and that, I think that will be more and more put in place. It's just people were so carried away by Claude and what it can do, that I think they forgot for a while that that you need to put the right boundaries. So I think we're just in the very early stages of these super powerful agents, and I think this will get solved, I think, to some extent. At least the obvious ones, right? This will go off. This will get.
And what do you think about regulation? Do you think we need regulation in the future?
Regulation by whom? You mean like governments?
Tell me.
What? So it's a good question. I mean, I do believe regulation is a good thing to some extent. I mean, yes.
As a European.
Yeah, right. I do. And that leads us back to what we want to prevent. And this AI, Alan, as you mentioned, what did you call them? I hate AI. Of course, we will need regulation. It has to be meaningful and implementable, and it needs not stop progress. So these are so many demands. It's not possible, right? All these three are probably not possible. We'll have to have trade-offs. Yes, we need to regulate. No question, right? Otherwise, as I mentioned, it will, data privacy is important, and we need to make. But I mean, I have to say, as a European, these regulations already. It's not, people are not super surprised, right? I mean, these questions we've already had with the internet before, and now it's just taken to a different level, and I think regulation is absolutely needed for, protection of human rights and human privacy.
Okay, so the importance of regulations is certainly something that I think all three of us might agree on, but it seems that there's a strong argument for keeping it deregulated to have maximum, innovation now, so that way, forces that you might be even more fearful of, for example, authoritarian China, right, from developing it faster and more efficiently. And with those dynamics, I feel that we're back in a kind of bad situation again. So
Fair enough. I mean, again, we had this also with the internet and with data protection and so on. It depends, again, what do you want to regulate? I mean, there's this whole debate, and should we open source our models, right? And then the argument goes, we shouldn't, because some, some country or whoever will take it and then not have regulations and do something bad with it, right? This is how it goes, usually, the argument. On the other hand, open sourcing also allows all the other players to make the models better, safer, do the right research. I think that eternal debate will stay, and we'll always write some sort of compromise between the two, I think. I guess I'm not saying anything new, but it's an old question. I'm saying it's not a new question, and we'll make these compromises as they come along. The models more powerful.
So we almost out of time, but I have two more questions. One is like, if you now, like, for people that want to start their own company, like startups, what do you think they should do? What topics? And the second one is for PhDs that's starting their PhD now. What do you think they should work on?
Yeah, this is, I mean, you could even ask what we should work on, right? Because certain questions we worked on now are either solved or in the hands of people who scale much more, right? And so on and so forth. So Let me start with the students, because this is a question I really think about, because, we all hire students in academia, and in the US, this is a 5-year endeavor. I mean, these students stay with you for 5 years. Now, in the past, when I hired students, I could kind of tell them how their PhD would look like. I would say, look, the first year, first you take courses, then you start being, co-authoring papers, but there's probably, it's my idea, and then you go and do the ideation comes from somewhere else, and then you execute, and then you do this, and eventually you will have your ideas, and then you go your own route, and you will do whatever XYZ vision, etc. I think this is now. I'm being very frank with the PhD students, and I say frankly, in these 5 years, let's interpolate backwards from the last 5 years. I cannot promise you that I know how your PhD will look like, but I do know that even your first and second year will not look like they used to look like for my previous generation of PhDs, because in all honesty, Claude is doing all that stuff, the pictures, the little experiments, and running the ablation of the model, this checking the hyperparameter search. It's a real problem, because there's a bit of a decision making on my end. Do I give a task that I know Claude can do to a student, just like, sports, so to speak? Right. So that's just the mechanics of it for a student. How to learn is difficult, and it's very hard to predict. But so then let's ask ourselves what the research we should do, right? And I think in academia, really, let's not solve the problems that the big companies anyway solve, right? I mean, let's not think of yet another loss function for reinforcement learning, unless it is connected to things we care about, as I said, data efficiency, or some new crazy architecture that in that scaling race you cannot test, because on small, it's too much of the optimization manifold to work immediately, so companies won't have time to pursue it. So we need to do the out of the box, not out of the box. I mean, the research that is not a direct continuation of what's done now. I find robotics very exciting, and world modeling and planning. And I've been spending some time thinking about it, or learning about it and thinking about it. And I think it's still in a very messy state. This whole idea of, again, I'm coming back to your information bottleneck, the whole idea of representing the world in a much smaller space, latent space, like our brain does, right? It goes through some sort of bottleneck. This question is not well solved yet. And this is why our AI is so large. And thinking about this more. And by the way, Alan, you mentioned the social sciences at some point, and I didn't come back to this. But you, Ravid, asked me what is reasoning, right? And honestly, I don't know the answer. And as a mathematician in the past and computer scientist, I actually didn't have to think about it. And I think now we're facing a reality where these questions are becoming interesting again. Cognition, what is this? What is a machine? What is a human? And social sciences, I think we are back to Renaissance, right? I think they should also have their Renaissance for that reason, because we're now facing these questions that are uncomfortable also. I mean, people keep telling me, what's this reasoning thing? And I have to start thinking, what is reasoning really? And how did evolution come about it? And what's the philosophical implications? All that stuff is back also. So it's not only the Renaissance, it's back also. Social sciences and humanities are back, right? So coming back to the students, so they need to learn something broad and do the things that industry cannot do, and very disciplined, because it's very easy to get into this. Oh, did they do the reinforcement loop right? Let's just add another, let's just reweight the loss a little bit better and see what it does. I'm not sure this is really impactful. I've done it myself, so but I'm not sure how impactful this research is if you're an academic and you're doing a PhD. You must do the stuff we cannot do, and think and have yours, talk to your social science buddies and your humanities buddies. And so coming up with also the brain, right? We have a solution, as I said, learning about the brain, I think cognitive science. So being very broad as a student in the beginning will pay off, right? Take more classes, take some neuroscience classes, go to biology. All this I would tell my students, and I will tell this generation of my students. So these are the topics, and then make the connections, bring them together, and use Claude as much as you can to have the figures done and all that stuff that we don't need anymore to be doing by a human. Startups, what are the topics? Again, I think robotics, if you have some good ideas. I think security, as I said, it's big. I mean, it has to come. It's not there. All these security breaches that we see, there need to be more solutions. What else?
What do you think about finance?
Yes, it's an interesting question. So I worked in finance for a while. I don't talk much to finance institutions. I know they're very conservative in general, so probably slow in adoption. And there's a reason for it, because the margin of error, and there isn't when you make a mistake, it's extremely costly. It costs you your life. The average half-life of a hedge fund, I heard, is 18 months. And that's not because they do a bad job in daily trading, but because they forget the tail event or something, right? I mean, these kind of extreme events are often wrongly. So finance is conservative for that reason. Finance has a lot of data, right? And the data has patterns. And of course, there have been algorithmic trading is it goes back to the late 70s and 80s. It's there. It must profit. I'm sure, I don't know again what they're doing, but surely machine learning should help find these patterns. That's what it's really good for. Then we can think further, because what is finance? Why is there profit in algorithmic trading, right? Because there are market inefficiencies, obviously, right? Because if they weren't, there's always I forgot what the law is, the law of perfect markets, or I forgot, you help me with this stuff. You know what I mean, the law of markets being calibrated, and you shouldn't be making profit in principle because the market already anticipates it and moves, but you do make a profit. I mean, I work in a company in finance that made a ton of profits, which means markets aren't equilibrated, but they should be, because why should a company make a lot of profit, a finance company? It's at the expense of somebody, right? Obviously, like the pension funds or somebody. So if we can contribute to making the markets actually balanced by having machine learning, spotting the patterns, immediately balancing them out, it will become less profitable, but probably better for humanity. So let me turn it into a positive story. Yes, so in that sense, finance should use as much AI as possible to make the markets finally balanced, cease to exist in some ways, or cease to have so many profits, but make it better for everybody else who's participating in the market.
Probably it will not be like that, right?
I don't know.
Probably like there will be some companies that will earn ton of money, and all the other will lose.
I mean, but there are serious market inefficiencies, and if AI will help get some of them away fast and make the market more efficient, that's a good thing.
I'll point out that this is also the argument for prediction markets, right? Which is that they add insider information to the economy, but now we just have everybody betting on everything with Polymarket, right? And what's the other one? Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the problem there is that like you bet on, I don't know, someone will die, right, or things like crazy like that. That like it's immoral to do it, even beside like the inside information. Okay, I think we're out of time. Do you have anything else that you want to add, to promote? Anything?
And I actually don't have much of a personal agenda here. I mean, again, an appeal, I think what is close to my heart is, again, maybe two things. I mentioned them already. One was a message to the mathematicians, and to generally people who are somewhat still in denial. Really use the tools. Just have a look once, because if you don't, somebody else will, and you'll be worse off. You have to use the tools, have a look. And then my second message again is, as much as they can be doing evil in one hand, they can do good in the other hand. And I think these grassroots initiative, I have these friends who always had hacking for good and all these things. Now it should be, there should be many more AI grassroots kind of AI for good initiatives, and they will be able to do things, right? Good things. And, there is so much to counter all the things we don't like about AI. There is so much in a human nature that can be leveraged with AI to do it, so to speak. These are the 2 points. Other than that, I wanted to thank you guys. You're doing an amazing job. I think the podcast generally is a wonderful medium, and you guys are spreading the word of various people, which is fantastic. I love your title. I think it's very much to the point, as I several times said. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much that you came. It was really great. Always great to talk with you.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Julia.
Likewise.
And thank you for the audience for listening. See you next time.